All right, let's talk about something we've all done, over-explaining. You know what I mean. You say no to something and suddenly you're handing over a full PowerPoint presentation on why you can't make it. Or you set a boundary and 5 seconds later, you're scrambling to prove that you're not being difficult or selfish. Sound familiar? Here's the thing, over-explaining is not clarity. It's not kindness. It's a sign of weak boundaries. And underneath it, fear. Fear of disappointing people, fear of being misunderstood, fear of not being enough. But here's the truth. People who honor their own worth don't over-explain. They don't feel the need to justify every decision. They stand firm. And that's what we're going to unpack today. Over-explaining is a people-pleasing reflex. When you over-explain, what you're really saying is, please don't be upset with me. It's an attempt to control how others perceive you. But healthy boundaries mean letting go of that control and trusting that the right people will respect your choices. No justification required. Let's be real. Most of us don't over-explain because we love hearing ourselves talk. We do it because deep down, we're afraid of what will happen if we don't. Maybe they'll think we're rude. Maybe they'll get mad. Maybe they'll think we don't care. And so instead of saying, hey, I can't make it, we go into a 3-paragraph monologue about how busy we are, how much we wish we could come, and how we feel absolutely terrible about it. But here's what's really happening. When we over-explain, we're not actually communicating for them. We're managing our own discomfort. We're trying to soften the impact of our boundaries so that we don't have to sit with the unease of possibly disappointing someone. It's self-protection dressed up as politeness. And listen, I get it. Nobody wakes up in the morning and says, you know what I'd love today? To disappoint people. No, we want to be liked. We want to be seen as good, as kind, as easygoing. And for a lot of us, that pattern started early. Maybe you grew up in a family where saying no wasn't an option, where love felt conditional, where you learned that keeping people happy was the safest thing you could do. Maybe you were taught that being agreeable made you lovable. So now, as an adult, when you set a boundary, your nervous system panics. Your brain goes, uh-oh, they're going to think you're selfish. Quick explain, justify, make it sound reasonable. And before you know it, you're handing over way too much information, hoping it'll keep you in the clear. But here's the truth. People who are comfortable with their own worth don't do this. They trust that their boundaries are enough. They know that a simple no, I can't, or that doesn't work for me is a full sentence. They don't feel the need to pad it with a dozen justifications because they aren't trying to manage someone else's feelings. And let me tell you, when you stop over-explaining, something really interesting happens. The people who genuinely respect you, they don't need a long explanation. They hear your boundary and they go, got it. No drama, no guilt trip, just respect. But the people who expect you to bend, they'll notice. They'll push. They'll say, what do you mean you can't? Are you sure? Can't you just? In that moment, that's where the work is, because that's when the discomfort shows up. And that's when you have to decide, do I cave? Do I soften it? Do I start over-explaining? Or do I stand in my truth? Here's what I know. If you struggle with boundaries, over-explaining feels like a safety net. It makes you feel like you're in control. But the irony is, it actually gives away your control. It signals that your boundary is flexible, that it's up for negotiation. And the more you explain, the more you open the door for pushback. So the real work is in resisting that urge, in pausing when you feel the need to over-explain, in reminding yourself, I don't owe an explanation for prioritizing myself. Because the more you practice that, the more you strengthen your boundaries, and the more you show up as the person who trusts their own worth, no explanation required. Over-explaining is often rooted in shame, not clarity. It's easy to believe that if we just explain ourselves well enough, people will understand and accept our boundaries. But more often than not, over-explaining doesn't come from a place of wanting to be clear. It comes from a deep, often unconscious fear that if we don't justify ourselves, people will see us as selfish, difficult, or unworthy. Shame is that voice in the back of our minds whispering, who do you think you are? It tells us that setting a boundary isn't just inconvenient for others, it makes us bad people. And when we believe that, we scramble to soften the edges of our no with excessive explanations, hoping to earn permission to stand in our own truth. Now, let's be clear, shame is sneaky. It doesn't announce itself with a big flashing sign that says, hey, you're feeling unworthy. No, it disguises itself as over-responsibility, as guilt, as the need to make sure everyone is happy with us at all times. And if you've been raised in a culture, whether that's a family, a community, or a workplace, where approval was given based on how accommodating you were, then chances are you've learned that saying no is something that needs to be defended. So what happens? You say no, but you don't leave it there. You start explaining. You make sure the other person knows that you're not trying to be mean. You overcompensate. You justify, and before you know it, you've spent 10 minutes making your boundary sound as palatable as possible so that no one, heaven forbid, thinks poorly of you. But here's the problem. The second we start over-explaining, we're handing our power over to someone else. We're saying, I need you to understand and approve of my boundary for it to be valid. And that's not a boundary. That's seeking permission. There's a difference between explaining something for the sake of clarity and over-explaining out of shame. Clarity sounds like, I won't be able to make it tonight. Shame sounds like, oh my gosh, I feel so bad. I have this other thing and I wish I could, but I just can't make it work. I hope you're not mad. I really hate saying no. See the difference? One is firm, direct, and self-assured. The other is swimming in guilt. And listen, I know this is hard. If you're a person who struggles with boundaries, the first time you say a clean, simple no without over-explaining, it's going to feel wrong. It's going to feel uncomfortable, maybe even unbearable. But that discomfort, that's not a sign that you're doing something wrong. It's a sign that you're unlearning a pattern of shame. Because here's the truth. People with strong boundaries don't feel the need to prove that they're good before they stand in their truth. They don't believe that their worthiness is tied to how much they accommodate others. They know that their needs matter, and they trust that the right people will respect them without requiring an explanation. So the next time you catch yourself over-explaining, pause. Take a breath. Ask yourself, am I saying this because it's necessary? Or am I saying this because I feel like I have to prove that I'm still a good person? And if it's the latter, let it go. Your boundaries are valid. You are allowed to take up space, and you don't need an essay to justify that. Strong boundaries are clear and concise. A clear, confident no, I can't, is a full sentence. The moment we start justifying, we dilute our boundary. Strong boundaries are about self-trust. They don't need an essay to back them up. Now, let's just sit with that for a second. Because for so many of us, saying no, I can't, and leaving it at that feels impossible. It feels cold. It feels like we're being dismissive, or worse, rude. And that's because most of us were never taught how to set boundaries in a way that's both firm and kind. We were taught that in order to say no, we had to package it nicely, soften it, explain it, and make sure the other person felt okay about it before we could walk away. But here's the truth. When a boundary is real, it doesn't need fluff. It doesn't need decoration. It doesn't need a PowerPoint presentation with bullet points and footnotes. It just is. Think about the last time someone gave you a really clear, respectful boundary. Something like, I won't be able to make it, but I hope you have a great time. Chances are you didn't sit there analyzing it, looking for hidden meaning, or wondering if they secretly hated you. You just accepted it, moved on, because it was clear, direct, and confident. Now, compare that to someone who starts with, oh gosh, I feel so bad. I really wish I could come, but I have this other thing, and I don't want you to think I don't care. It's just that I've been so overwhelmed, and maybe if I move some things around, I could. You hear that, and suddenly it's weird. It creates more questions. It sounds unsure. It makes you wonder, do they really want to say no? Are they asking me to convince them to change their mind? That's what over-explaining does. It turns a simple boundary into something murky, something unclear. It invites negotiation. And once a boundary becomes negotiable, it stops being a boundary. People with strong boundaries trust that they don't have to prove or justify their limits. They know that their time, energy, and well-being matter, and they communicate that with clarity. It's not unkind. It's not selfish. It's just clear. And clarity, my friends, is kindness. Because when we're clear, we respect both ourselves and the other person. We're not leading them on. We're not sending mixed signals. And we're not leaving the door open for resentment. We're saying, this is my limit. And I trust that you can handle it. And that's the heart of it, right? Trusting that we don't have to over-explain to be understood. Trusting that we don't have to justify our choices to be worthy of respect. Trusting that the people who truly care about us will accept our boundaries, no explanations required. You teach people how to treat you. If you always over-explain, you're signaling that your boundaries are negotiable. People learn that if they push a little, you'll cave. The more concise and firm you are, the more people respect your limits. Now, this is one of those truths that's both freeing and a little terrifying. Because if we're teaching people how to treat us, that means some of the ways we've been treated, we've played a part in allowing it. Not because we wanted to, not because we deserved it, but because we didn't yet know how to set boundaries that were strong, clear, and self-respecting. And I get it. Most of us weren't raised with great boundary models. A lot of us grew up in homes where saying no wasn't an option, where love or approval felt conditional, or where we had to work really hard to keep the peace. We learned, even without realizing it, that being agreeable made things easier, that explaining ourselves kept us safe, and that avoiding conflict was the best way to keep relationships intact. So now, as adults, when we say no and someone pushes back, our first instinct is to soften, to explain, to make sure they understand. And listen, explaining isn't always bad. There's nothing wrong with offering context when it's helpful. But when we do it from a place of needing to be understood, when we over-explain in a way that makes our boundaries sound flexible, we're unintentionally telling the other person, keep pushing, I might change my mind. Think about the friend who always asks you for favors at the last minute. If you've spent years saying yes or giving long-winded reasons why you can't, but making it sound like maybe you could, they've learned something from that. They've learned that if they press just a little more, if they apply a little guilt, you'll probably give in. Not because they're trying to manipulate you, but because that's the pattern that's been set. Or the coworker who always hands you extra tasks. If every time you've tried to push back, you followed it up with, if you really need me to, I can probably find a way to make it work. They've learned that your boundaries are more of a suggestion than a standard. And that's what's so important to understand. Boundaries aren't just about what we say. They're about what we reinforce. Every time we over-explain, every time we soften, every time we say no but make it sound like a maybe, we're reinforcing the idea that we don't fully stand by our own limits. But here's the beautiful thing. Just like we've taught people that we're flexible, we can also teach them that we're firm. We can retrain the people around us by practicing clear, simple boundaries and following through on them. And yes, that's going to feel uncomfortable at first. It's going to feel unnatural, maybe even scary. Because when you start setting strong boundaries, some people aren't going to like it. Not because you're doing anything wrong, but because they've gotten used to a version of you that didn't have them. But here's the truth. The people who respect you, they'll adjust. They might be surprised at first, but they'll adapt. The ones who don't, the ones who get angry, who guilt trip, who try to make you feel like you're doing something wrong by taking care of yourself, those are the people who were benefiting from you not having boundaries in the first place. So the real work here isn't in making sure everyone understands. It's in trusting yourself enough to stand firm even when they don't. Because the more you practice this, the more you'll see that people will rise to meet your level of self-respect. And the ones who don't, well, that tells you everything you need to know. Not everyone deserves access to your inner world. When you over-explain, you're giving people more information than they need, sometimes more than they've even asked for. Boundaries aren't just about saying no. They're about protecting your emotional energy and deciding who gets the privilege of deeper access to you. And that word privilege is important because somewhere along the way, many of us got the message that everyone is entitled to an explanation. That if someone asks why we can't do something, we owe them a detailed response. That if we set a boundary, we need to make sure it makes sense to them. But here's the thing, your boundaries don't have to make sense to everyone else. They just have to make sense to you. Think about it. If someone asks you for a favor and you say, I can't, and they respond with, why not? What's really happening in that moment? In a healthy relationship, someone might be genuinely curious, but more often than not, that question carries an undertone of entitlement. It's less about understanding and more about whether your reason is good enough for them to accept. But your time, your energy, your emotional well-being, those aren't up for negotiation. You don't owe everyone a peek behind the curtain of your life. Not every person, not every situation deserves a full explanation because explanations are intimate. They invite people into your decision-making process, into your priorities, into the why behind what you do. And that kind of access, that's reserved for the people who have earned it. Now, let's be honest. This is uncomfortable, especially if you're someone who's used to over-explaining. If you've spent years believing that people's approval is tied to how well you justify yourself, then setting boundaries without an explanation can feel unnatural, even harsh. But the truth is, the people who respect you don't need an explanation. And the people who demand one, they're often the ones who were never planning to respect your boundary in the first place. So what do? You practice discernment. You ask yourself, does this person need to know this? Is sharing this going to strengthen our relationship, or am I just trying to manage their perception of me? Because that's what over-explaining really is. It's emotional labor. It's the unpaid, exhausting work of making sure people understand you so they won't be upset, so they won't judge you, so they won't see you in a negative light. And that work, it's not yours to carry. The real shift happens when you realize that your boundaries are not about getting other people to approve of them. They're about you standing firmly in what you know is right for you. They're about recognizing that your energy is sacred, your time is valuable, and your emotional well-being is not a public resource. And yes, there will be moments where it feels uncomfortable, where someone pushes back and you feel that old urge rise up to explain, to soften, to make it okay for them. But every time you resist that urge, every time you hold your boundary without over-explaining, you are reminding yourself that your choices don't need a permission slip. You are reinforcing the truth that you get to decide who has access to your inner world. And that is a power worth protecting. At the heart of all this is one simple truth. You are not here to be endlessly understood, endlessly available, or endlessly accommodating. You are here to live a life that honors your time, your energy, and your worth. And that means setting boundaries that don't need an explanation, trusting that the right people will respect them, and knowing that the ones who don't were never meant to hold that much space in your life to begin with. Boundaries are not walls. They are doors that you get to open and close with intention. The more you practice standing firm without over-explaining, the more freedom you'll feel, the more confidence you'll build, and the more you'll realize that protecting your peace isn't selfish, it's necessary. So as you move forward, I want you to remember this. Your no is enough. Your decisions don't need an essay, and your well-being is worth more than someone else's temporary discomfort. Trust yourself, stand firm, and know that you are worthy of clear, confident boundaries. Good luck. Go own your space with courage and grace.